Hello, carnivores and carnivore curious. I'm Cassandra. Welcome to my Apex Odyssey. Just doing a little cleanup around my desk. I've got to get ready to go to bed soon. It is really late. It's 10:17. I mean, it's really late for me not to have even started getting ready for bed yet. So I had a really busy day today. First of all, I had like 3 hours-ish worth of meetings at work. So I ended up having to take my lunch really early, around 2 o'clock, when I'm used to taking it like 5 o'clock. So I've just had a small lunch. And then I don't think I got another break, a very brief one, after all the meetings were done. So anyway, I had to cook dinner. I had to have dinner after I got off work at 7 o'clock. So that made me later than usual getting anything done. And then I had to, we're installing some stuff. Got a new printer and was updating drivers and all that kind of stuff, and I got a new remote for my TV, a Chromecast remote, and had a huge headache trying to get that set up because the other remote just died. I mean, yeah, I tried putting batteries in it and that didn't work. So I had to replace that, and now it is 10:18, and I have not even begun to get ready for bed yet. Saga's gonna start fussing at me pretty soon because she likes to go to bed at a reasonable hour. So what am I going to talk about this evening? And I don't know if it's just because I've been stressed lately and my resistance to everything is down with all the medical stuff going on. I've just been a grouchy old bee. Stuff is getting on my nerves, really aggravating me. And I wanted to talk about what makes me mad or sad about having to do the carnivore diet. And let's be serious here. I think most people who find their way to the carnivore diet are doing it out of desperation. I don't want anybody to have to eat this way. I do think that it is healthy for most people, but to have gotten, for your health to be in a situation where you just have to do it, to not be miserable and in poor health, that is a whole different story. And when you're in that situation like I am, you really can't play around with it. I mean, it's too precarious and too precious. The health benefits that I've gained, and I know my health is a wreck right now. I've got some crazy stuff going on, but still, getting rid of those autoimmune conditions or putting them in remission, whatever you want to call it, it's made my life worth living again. But there are some things that are just really upsetting to me about having to do this. And the first one, I think it first came to my attention because so this is late February and we're having spring weather off and on. So wild plums are blooming. And whenever I was a kid, my family, we lived way out in the woods. I mean, like our nearest neighbor was 2 miles away down the railroad track. If you wanted to drive around the road, it was like 7 miles. So in springtime, and they get ready, they start blooming about this time of year, and then the plums they get ready to our liking in May, late May, and when they're green, and it's making my mouth water just thinking about it because they're so tart. But that's how we like them. Crunchy, not quite. You have to wait till the seeds get hard in the middle. Until then, they're kind of bitter. But, the mouth's watering. But anyway, we would go pick them off the side of the road when I was a kid. We would walk through the woods looking for them, and they don't grow in the shade. They need a sunny spot. But we lived in a place where there was a lot of woods. There was a lot of old abandoned homesteads. You know, there was a place with a mostly fallen down shack, and where their yard was, where it was sunny and it hadn't grown up with trees yet, there would sometimes be plums growing there. So that was an experience for us growing up. We would go and do this every year. We'd ride around and look on the side of the road looking for plums. And I remember standing on the top of a cab of a truck when I was just a kid, probably 10 or 11 years old, reaching up into the trees, pulling them down and putting them in ice cream buckets. That's what we used to collect them in. And as I got older, progress happened and the roads were widened, so those things came along, those bush hogs, and cut down most of them. Though I still know where a few wild plum groves are. They're not easily accessible, and you probably get in trouble for trespassing. I mean, I've been yelled at, chased off people's property. A neighbor called me on the phone and told me off. My mom got chased by dogs before in our enthusiasm to go and find these green plums. We were ruthless. And that's something that was really special to us, and I miss it so much. I did it well into my 20s. I think since then they just got too hard to find. But I've found, that you can buy them through the farmer's market, and even the Facebook Marketplace people. There would usually at least be a couple of local people who would sell them by the Ziploc bag, so I would get up to 2 to 5 pounds and just enjoy them and enjoy the nostalgia, and they're delicious. Eat them with salt. So that's not the food so much that I miss, but the experience. And another thing that I miss, that I hate being on the carnivore diet because it makes me not get to have this, is quince. That's another. Quince are due in the wintertime after the first frost. And they are related to pears, I think. So you can buy quince sometimes in the grocery store, but this is not what we got. The difference between how apples are now. They're modified for human enjoyment, and they originated from a crab apple that's a tiny, round, a little, not much bigger than a cherry, that are really sour. This is the difference between the kind of quince that you could buy at the grocery store. And I've bought them before, and whatever that is, it's not what I'm looking for. But real quince are, they're big. They'll get to be about the size of a pear. And they're kind of, but they're more shaped like an apple. Isn't that weird? So they're green, and they have this really tough skin that you have to peel off. We usually peel them off with a knife. And the meat is tough. And it's just really sour and a little bit bitter. And it's got this astringent quality that makes your gums shrink up. So after you've eaten some of it, your mouth feels weird and your tongue feels dry and burns a little bit. But that's something that, we would get them every year, just one or two. We would, you could find them growing in places. Normally, it was pretty easy to get somebody to give you a couple. A few, well, I won't say a few, like over 10 years ago, I lived in a place in the country that had a quince tree. And it was always, my favorite part of the early winter, whenever those quince got ready. Because you can make jelly out of them. And that's what most people do. If you read about them, people will say they can't be eaten raw. They have to be cooked into something, and most people would turn them into quince jelly, which is delicious. But you can eat them raw, and they're probably an acquired taste. But again, it's an experience that I'm going to miss again. So I've already missed it twice. And it makes me sad. It's like, why does my body have to be so screwed up that I can't even have a little bit of fruit? Like wild plums and quince. I hate it. But I'm not going to do it. I mean, I don't hate it more than I hate being almost disabled from rheumatoid arthritis and depression. That is worse than not getting to have plums and quince. And the third thing that is so, it just breaks my heart that I cannot do this anymore, and that is to make homemade biscuits. So I've got a whole story about that. I grew up with my grandmother most of the time while my mom was single a lot. She was married to my dad until I was 4. And then after that, we moved in with my grandmother, my mom's mother, and lived with her for most of the rest, of my young personhood until I got to be about 16. And then still, I would go back every once in a while and live with her for a while. But my grandmother was born in 1926, and she lived through a lot. She passed away in 1993-ish, I think. 92, 93, something like that. But she was a cook. She actually owned a restaurant or a cafe at one point, so she was a cook. But she just made delicious food, and she could make meals. We were so poor when I was a kid, but she could make a meal out of anything. Sometimes we had biscuits and salmon patties, but that was a meal, She was so resourceful. She canned her own tomatoes and other kinds of vegetables. She always put food up in the freezer. She gardened for as long as she could, as long as she was able. She had a big garden sometimes, and I have spent a lot of my childhood working in the garden and raising chickens and other critters. You know how stuff comes and goes on a small farm. But her biscuits were just like a work of art. And I finally, in my 40s, figured out what the secret was. Okay, and I'm going to tell you, because I don't think you can replicate it anyway. But what she did, she didn't use flour out of the flour bag. She had a brown wooden bowl. It was a big salad bowl, like this, big, probably 12 inches across the top, and pretty deep. Like this, not like, some people use a dough bowl to make biscuits, but hers was deep. It was actually, it started its life as a salad bowl, but she started using it for her biscuit bowl, and she made biscuits in this bowl probably every day for decades, because most days we had biscuits for breakfast. and she left the flour in there. She would, fill it mostly up with flour, leaving about that much room at the top. And then she would run her hands in there and her hand in there and make a well. So there's this flour, this pile of flour with a well in the middle, and that's where she would add her buttermilk and her Crisco. And she would just stir it, start stirring the sides in, because she used, unlike most people that I've seen on the internet do this, instead of mixing in cold oil or grease, she melted it and poured it in there. She was not using, she wasn't doing it the hard way. She wasn't crumbling it together like that. So she would stir in the well and add a little bit of flour, kept incorporating it until the dough ball got to be the right consistency. So there's this ball of dough in there, and it's got the wall of flour around it. So after she got it stirred up with a spoon to the right consistency, she would use her hand and just turn the bowl and, tuck in the flour, the dough ball. She would do that a few times. And then the dough would be in a little loaf shape, and she would pinch off the right amount and roll it out and stick it in the pan. So she made these hand-rolled biscuits. Now, they have the most delightful taste, and she never told me a recipe because she didn't have a recipe, but I finally got a recipe that got the right consistency of biscuit. And but they never tasted as good. I mean, they had such a tart sourdough buttermilk taste. It was just unmatched. And it's like I said, it was while I was in my 40s before I figured out why that was. And it was because she had this flour bowl that she had been using, probably never cleaned it out, for decades, and it had grown a colony of sourdough-like bacteria in there. The yeast that lived in that bowl, they just kept getting added back to and added back to. And so over the decades, that had developed into this really delightful, tangy, sourdough-flavored biscuit. And that's why I could never get the taste right. I was like, what's wrong with my buttermilk? It's not sour enough. What's going on? What's the problem? How come I don't have that tangy bite? And it's because I didn't have 40-year-old flour that had just been, like every time she would make biscuits, she'd add a little more so that she would top it off. And her bowl never got washed. So that wooden bowl. And I always wonder, did she know this? Did she have any idea? It's not anything she ever talked about. She wasn't one to do fermenting or sourdough baking, so I'm not sure if she was even aware of the nature of this. If she knew that using this bowl and never cleaning it out, if she knew that it contributed to the flavor of her biscuits, and if she did realize, if she knew why that was the case. But for whatever reason, whether she knew it or not, it was amazing. And I had at one time found myself a wooden bowl that was big enough, and it was a salad bowl. It was not, a dough bowl to hold my flour. And I even made a custom lid for it, because you have to keep it loosely covered. You got to put a cover on there so the ants and stuff don't get in it, but it can't be airtight. Air has to flow in and out. So I had arranged this, and I was actually doing this for a while. I was making a pan of biscuits every morning, because I was going to grow my own sourdough biscuit bowl. But now I can't do it anymore. I can't eat the biscuits, first of all, and there's nobody to eat the biscuit. I have absolutely no use. It would be a waste for me to spend the money and the time doing it. And that makes me really sad. I mean, the biscuits were delicious, but what I really am going to miss out on is the experience. You know, for the rest of my whole life, I'll be sorry and sad that I'm not able to do that, because it was such a huge part of my life. You know, it was very much part of my family tradition. That meant a lot to me. And I can't do it because my body is just too screwed up. And I don't dare toy around with it or chance it, because I know that my addiction is so bad that, I mean, it would send me off the rails in a minute if I added any fruits or grains back into my meal plan. It would be a disaster. So I guess those are, I may think of other things later that I hate about it, but right now, me being grumpy and aggravated about everything, just disgusted with my situation. Those things I really miss, and my mouth doesn't want them, but my heart wants them. And I feel sad that I can't have it. And with that, it is 10:38, and I am probably going to, I don't know if I'll take the time to edit this video tonight or not. I may just do it in the morning, because I still got to take Saga for a walk. I still got to go take a shower and get ready for bed. And it'll be probably past 11 when I get all that done. But I hope you all have a wonderful evening, morning, day, rest of your week. And I'll definitely see you in the next one.